Book 2 of the Bastion Club. Alicia is living a deception, desperation caused by determined but penniless lady to boldly launch her ravishing younger sister into the ton, and have her make a spectacular match by masquerading as the widow Mrs. Carrington. Alicia can act as the perfect chaperone, but fashionable ladies are not accused of murder. When Tony Blake discovers Alicia standing over a dead body in his godmother's garden, every instinct tells him she is innocent. His connections allow him to take control of the investigation. His social prominence provides for public support, but is more than honor that compels him to protect her and to do everything in his seductive power to make her his. Here are your Bastion Club members. Anthony Blake, Viscount Torrington. The Bastion Club, Montrose Place, London, March 15, 1816. We've a month before the season begins, and already the harpies are hunting in packs. Charles St. Austell sank into one of the 8 straight-back chairs around the mahogany table in the Bastion Club's meeting room. As we predicted, Anthony Blake, 6th Viscount Torrington. Yes, ma'am. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. You want me to read you a story? Do you want to read the story too? Hmm? My mother might be in residence in Devon, and she has a worthy lieutenant in my godmother, Lady Amory. If I don't appear at her entertainments, at least I can be assured of receiving a sharp note the next morning, inquiring why. There were laughs, resigned, cynical, and commiserating, from the others as they took their seats. Christian Allardyce, Gervase, and Jack Warnefleet all sat then in concert. All eyes went to the empty chair beside Charles. Treham sent his regrets at the head of the table. Christian didn't bother keeping a straight face. He didn't sound all that sincere. He wrote that he had more pressing engagements, but wished us joy in our endeavors. He expects to be back in town in a week, however, and looks forward to supporting the 6 of us through our upcoming travails. That's kind of him, Gervase quipped, but they were all grinning. Tristan Wetham had been the first of their number to successfully achieve his goal. The same goal they all were intent on attaining. They all needed to marry. That common aim had spawned this, their club, their last bastion against the matchmakers of the ton. Of the 6 of them, as unyet wed, gathered this evening to share the latest news, Tony felt sure he was the most desperate. Although why he felt so restless, so frustrated, as if poised for action, yet with no enemy in sight, he couldn't fathom. He hadn't felt so moody in years. Then again, he hadn't been a civilian, an ordinary gentleman, for years either. I vote we meet every fortnight, Jack Warnefleet said. We need to keep abreast of events, so to speak. I agree, Gervase nodded across the table. If any of us has anything urgent to report, we shall call a meeting as needed. Given the pace at which matters move in the ton, 2 weeks is the limit. By then, the ground has been shifted. I heard the patronesses of Almack's are thinking of opening their season early. Such is the interest. It is true one still has to wear knee breeches. On the pain of being turned away, Christian raised his brows. Although I've yet to ascertain why that would be painful. The others laughed. They continued trading information on events, the latest fashion, and tunnish distractions, eventually moving on to comment and caution on individual matrons, matchmaking mamas, dragons, gorgons, and the like, all those who lay in wait for unusual eligible gentlemen with a view to matrimony, ensnaring them. Lady Instwhile, one to avoid. Once she sinks her talons into you, it's the devil of the job getting free. It was their way of coping with the challenge before them. They'd all spent the last decade or more in service of His Majesty's government as agents acting in unofficial capacity, scattered throughout France and the neighboring states, collecting the information on enemy troops, ships, provisions, and strategies. They'd all reported to Dazeel, a master who lurked a spider in the center of his web, buried in the depths of Whitehall. He oversaw all English military engagement agents on foreign soil, and his identity will be known to us, the reader, but will not be known to his men for several books yet. It will be kept a secret. Yet, in gathering information, evaluating, exploiting it, they were experts, so they established the Bastion Club to facilitate mutual support for their individual campaigns. As Charles had described it with typical dramatic flair, the club was their secure house from which each would infiltrate the town, identify the lady he wanted as wife, and then storm the enemy's position and capture her. It sounds like a military plan. Do you think it sounds like a military plan? uh, set on in the gentleman's club, hounded by fond papas, as well as gimlet-eyed matrons, all but buried beneath the avalanche of invitations that daily arrived at their doors. Life in the ton as an unmarried, wealthy, titled, eminently eligible gentleman was these days fraught with danger. Could you imagine if they had the telephone? Could you imagine the ring, 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 ring? Or could you imagine text messages, emails, invitations, thousands of emails, invitations to events in your email? Could you imagine? Too many had fallen in the battles of the peninsula and more recently at Waterloo. They, the survivors, were marked men. They were outnumbered, but they'd be damned if they'd be outgunned. They were experts in battle, in tactics and strategy. They weren't about to be taken. If they had any say in it, they would do the taking. That was at the heart of it. The raison d'etre of the Bastion Club. Anything more? Christian glanced around the table. All shook their heads. They drained their glasses. I have to make an appearance at Lady Holland's soiree. Charles put a face. I gather she feels she lent Trentham a helping hand and now wants to try her luck with me. Gervase raised his brows. And you're giving her the chance? Really? On his feet, Charles met his gaze. My mother's sisters and sister-in-laws are in town. Oh, I see. Thinking of taking up residence here for the nonce? Not at present, but I won't deny the thought has crossed my mind. I'll come with you. Christian strolled around the table. I want to have a word with Leigh Hunt about that book he's writing. He's sure to be at Holland House. Tony stood. Christian glanced his way. Are you still glorying in solitary state? Yes, thank heaven the matter's fixed in Devon. Tony resettled his coat with a graceful shrug. I have, however, been summoned by my godmother to a soiree at Amory House. I'll have to put in an appearance. He looked around the table. Anyone going that way? Gervase, Jack, and DeVerell shook their heads. They decided to retire to the club's library and spend the rest of the evening in compatible silence. Tony bid them farewell. Grinning, they wished him luck. Together with Christian and Charles, he went downstairs and into the street. They parted on the pavement. Christian and Charles made for Kensington and Holland House, while Tony headed for Mayfair. Reluctance dragged at him. He ignored it. Any experienced commander knew there were forces it was wise never to waste energy opposing them, such as godmothers, especially French godmothers. Good evening, Mrs. Carrington. A pleasure to meet you again. Alicia Carrington smiled and gave Lord Marcella her hand. My lord, I dare say you recall my sister, Miss Pevensey. As his lordship gazed, was riveted on Adriana, standing a few steps away. Alicia's question was largely rhetorical. His lordship, however, had clearly decided that getting Alicia's support was critical to securing Adriana's hand. While acknowledging Adriana, he remained by Alicia's side and made conversation in a distant, distracted fashion. That last something Alicia viewed with amusement was due to his lordship's absorption with Adriana, talking animally with coterie of admirers with vying for her favor. Adriana was an English rose gowned in pink silk, a sharper day than generally worn by young ladies, the better to exploit her luxuriant dark curls, those sheened in the cavalier's glow, creating the perfect frame for her bewitching features, her large brown eyes set under arched black brows, her peaches and cream complexion and rosebud lips. Alice's as for Adrian's figure, deliberately understated in the demure gown that was hinted at rather than defined. In tight, even its gown and sackcloth, Alice's sister was a package guaranteed to capture a gentleman's eyes, which was the reason they were in London, in the very heart of the ton, masquerading. At least Alicia was. Adriana, who she purported to be. While making the appropriate responses to Lord Marcella, Alicia monitored all those who paid court to her younger sister. Everything to the date had gone exactly as they, sitting in the tiny parlor of their small house in Little Compton in rural Warwickshire, along with the surrounding few acres were all she, Adriana, and her three brothers jointly owned. Had planned, yet not even in their admittedly unfettered imaginations had they envisioned the events, people, and opportunities would fall out so well. Lord Marcella grew increasingly restless. Taking pity on him, Alicia eased him off Adriana's circle, then stepped back, effacing herself as a good chaperone should. She eavesdropped, listening as Adriana handled the gentlemen surrounding her with customary confidence, although neither she nor Adriana had had any previous experience of the ways of society elite. Since their appearance in town and the introduction to these exalted circles some weeks ago, they managed without the slightest hiccup. 18 months of intense research and their own sound sense had stood them in good stead. Having three much younger brothers whom they largely reared and eradicated any tendency to panic, both jointly and individually, they'd risen to every challenge and triumphed. Mrs. Carrington, your servant, ma'am. The drawled words jolted her from her rosy future, concealing her dismay, calming lips curving. She gave her hand to the gentleman bowing before her. Mr. Ruskin, how pleasant to meet you here. The pleasure, I assure you, is all mine. Straightening, Ruskin delivered the comment without an intent look and smile that sent a warning slithering down her spine. He was a languid man, half a head taller than she, and heavily built. He was well dressed and had the manners of a gentleman, yet there was something about him that gave her the creeps, the heebie-jeebies, the creeps. For some ungodly reason, Ruskin had from the first meeting fixed his eye on her. If she could understand why, she'd do something to deflect it. Her ever-fertile imagination painted him as a snake, with her as his mesmerized prey. She pretended ignorance of the tenor of his attraction and tried to be discouraging. To no avail, he still sought her out, increasingly pointedly. Thus far she avoided any declaration, thereby avoiding having outright to refuse it. Given her masquerade, she didn't want to risk an overt dismissal, didn't want to draw any attention her way. The most she dared was to behave coolly. If you would grant me the favor of a few minutes in private, my dear, I would be grateful. I'm afraid, sir, that my sister in my care, I cannot. What I have to say will have some impact on your sister. However, your concern is understandable. His gaze lifted, he scanned the room, filled with the fashionable Lady Amory Cerie, had attracted the cream of the ton. They were present in force, exchanging on the Lady Undis, exclaiming the repaired juicy scandals. Perhaps she will repair to the side of them. With this noise no one will hear us. We will be able to talk, and you'll be able to keep your ravishing, lovely young sister safe and in view. So they go to an alcove. I would suggest, my dear, that you hear me out, all I have to say before making a reply. I think I should mention that my home lies not far from Bledington. Alicia struggled to mask her shock. Bledington lay southwest of the market of Chippington. A little Compton, their village, lay to the northwest. As the crow flew, there could be no more than 8 miles between them. But she had never met him before. We never met in the country, but I saw you and your sister when I was home last Christmas, the pair of you crossing the market square. I determined then to have you. Indeed, quite romantic. I asked and was told your name was Alicia Pevensey. If you had not appeared in London, no doubt nothing would have come of it. But you did appear a few months later as a widow of more than a year's standing. I wasn't fooled for a moment, but I comprehended your need of the ruse and appreciated your courage in implementing it. It was a bold move, but no one with every chance of success. I saw no reason to do other than wish you well, as my admiration for your astuteness grew, my interest in you on a personal level firmed. However, when I offered you my protection, you refused. On reflection, I decided to do the honorable thing and offer for your hand. Again, however, you turned up your nose. Quite why, I have no notion. You seem uninterested in attaching a husband, solely concerned with watching over your sister as she makes her choice. Presumably, given your apparently have no need of funds, you've determined to make your own decision in your own time. I would suggest, my dear Miss Carrington, that your time has run out. What do you mean? I mean that your performance as a hoity widow in dismissing my suit was so convincing that I checked my information. Today I received a letter from old Dr. Lang, who assures me that the Percy sisters, both sisters, remain unwed. Indeed, yet his self-depreciation remained. But fear not, having concluded that marrying you would be an excellent notion, nothing I've learned has changed my mind. So let us be clear, Mrs. Carrington cannot continue in the ton, but if you consent to become Mrs. William Ruskin, I see no reason the ton should ever learn that Mrs. Carrington did not exist. So I'm offering you my hand again. I make myself plain. I believe I understand you perfectly, sir. However, I would ask for a little time to reply. You may have 24 hours. There isn't much to consider after all. Tomorrow evening you can formally accept me. Tomorrow night I will expect to share your bed. Like, what? 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 You want to what? You want to go where? Are you nuts? She's got to get past the shock first. A chair stood against the wall 2 yards away. She walked to it and sat, sipping water. After a few minutes, she flicked her fan and waved it before her face. She had to think. Adriana was safe for the moment. Blocking out all thought of the threat Ruskin had made, she focused on him, on what he'd said, on what he knew, and what he didn't. Why he was acting as he was, what insights they gave her, how she pressed him to change his mind. She, Adriana, and the three boys desperately needed Adriana to make a good match. Not with any gentleman, but with one with reasonable wealth and sufficiently good heart, not only to forgive them the deception they were practicing, but to provide for the boys' schooling. They were as near to penniless as made no difference. They were well born, but had no close connections. There were just the five of them, or more correctly, Alicia, Adriana, to look after them all. David was only 12 years old, Harry 10, and Matthew 8. One gentleman would be the right one for her, for them all, and then the family, Adriana, and the three boys would be safe. Alicia had no other goal before her. She hadn't had for past 18 months, since their mother had died. Their father died years before, leaving the family with little money and few possessions. They'd scrimped and saved and survived. Now they risked all on this one throw at fate in creating Adriana's undoubted beauty had given them. In order to do so, Alicia had behaved in ways she wouldn't otherwise countenance. She'd taken risks the otherwise would have known thus far won. She'd become Mrs. Carrington, a wealthy and fashionable widow, the perfect chaperone to introduce Adriana to the ton. Hiring a professional chaperone had been out of the question. Not only did they not have the funds, but the ton, especially the upper echelons, a wealthy widow representing her ravishing young sister, was a significantly different prospect to two provincial spinsters with a hired chaperone, one whose relative standing would have illuminated theirs. There had to be a way around Ruskin and a step. She could marry him, but the recoil she thought she evoked made her cast that as a last resort. She'd return to it if and only if there was no other way. One thing Raskin had said changed in her mind. He thought they had money. He discovered she'd never married, but he hadn't learned she was first cousin to a pauper. What if she told him? Would that make him turn aside from his plan, or simply place another weapon in his hands? The thought made her nauseous. She gulped the last of her water, then rose to set the glass down on a nearby sideboard. The movement had her facing down the pair of the room just as Ruskin stepped out the glass doors. Tracking through the crowd, she came up beside Adriana. With a smile at her cavaliers, her sister turned to her. What's wrong? Nothing I can't manage. I'll tell you about it later. I'm just going out on the terrace to talk to Mr. Ruskin. I'll be back shortly. I say, Mrs. Carrington, will you and Miss Percy be attending the opening night at the Theatre Royal? Young Lord Middleton was as eager as the Spaniard. Alicia returned a vague answer, exchanged a few more comments, then slid out of the group and headed for the glass doors. It was mid-March and chilly. She was glad of the shawl. Not surprisingly, there were no others strolling, and still frosty night. She glanced around, expecting to see Ruskin perhaps indulging in a cigar. But the terrace was empty. Walking to the balustrade, she surveyed the gardens, but no Ruskin. Had he chosen to leave the Surrey by this route? The idea had her stiffening her spine. Putting her shawl on, she decided to set the steps off the path. With every step Tony took along Park Street, his resistance to attending his godmother's soiree and smiling and chatting and doing the pretty with the gaggle of young ladies with whom he had nothing in common, and who, if they knew the man he truly was, would probably faint, wax stronger. Indeed, his reluctance over the whole damn business was veering toward the despondence. The fact that they, each and every one, would happily accept your suit if you chose to favor them, and think themselves blessed, raised definite questions as to their intelligence. He had never been an easy man. One look should tell any sane woman that. He would not be an easy husband. The position of his wife was one that would demand a great deal of a Tolder, as aspect which went the sweet young thing seemed to have no inkling. His wife. Not so many years ago, the thought of searching for her would have had him laughing. He hadn't imagined finding a wife was something that would unduly exercise him. When he needed to marry, the right lady would be there, miraculously waiting. You think? He wanted a wife. The restlessness that seemed to immerse his very soul left him no doubt of that. But exactly what he wanted, let alone why, was the point on which he'd run aground. Identify the target, the first rule in planning any successful survey. Until he succeeded in satisfying that requirement, he couldn't even start his campaign. The frustration irked, fueling his habitual impatience. Hunting a wife was 10 times worse than hunting spies had ever been. Tony's godmother's house stood at the corner of Park and Green Streets, facing Green Street. The garden gate opened to a path leading in the drawing-room terrace. By now the soiree would be in full swing, though the thought of female chatter, the high-pitched laughter, the giggles, the measuring glances of the patrons, the calculation in so many eyes welled and pressed down on him. Closing his hand on the wrought iron latch, he lifted it. The gate swung silently open. Passing through, he closed it behind him. Though the silent garden, heavily shadowed by large and ancient trees, the sound of conversation and laughter drifted down to him. Mentally grinding his loins, he drew in a deep breath, then quickly climbed the steep flight of steps that led up to the level of garden. Though in grain habit, he moved silently. The woman crouching by the side of the man lying sprawled on his back, shoulders propped against the trunk of the tree in the garden, didn't hear him. The tabloid exploded in Tony's vision as he gained the top of the stairs. Senses instantly alert, fully deployed, he paused. Slim svelte gown for the evening in silk, her dark hair piled high, with a silvery shawl wrapped around her shoulders and clutched tight with one hand. The lady slowly, very slowly rose. In her hand she held a long scallop stiletto. Streaks of blood beaded on the blade. She held the dagger by the hilt, loosely tipped between her fingers, pointing downward. She stared at the blade as if it was steak. A drop of liquid fell from the dagger's point. The lady shuddered. Tony stepped forward, driven by urge to take her in his arms. Catching himself, he halted. Sensing his presence, he looked up. "I think he's dead," she said. Her tone was flat, her voice shook. She was battling hysterics. He was thankful she was winning. "Where was it?" He kept his tone impersonal, businesslike. He crouched down, waited. "In his left side. It had almost fallen out. I didn't realize. Started to rise, but already come thready and died. Stay calm." He willed the order at her. A cursory examination confirmed she was right on both counts. The man was dead. He'd been knifed very neatly, a single deadly thrust between the ribs from the back. "Who is he?" William Ruskin. You knew him?" "No. That is, only to speak to, socially at the soiree." Waving back at the house, she dragged at her breath and rushed on. "I came out for some air, a headache." I thought to wander, and then I found him. Ruskin had threatened her, her plan, her family future. He'd been blackmailing her, and now he was dead. His blood oozed in a black pool by his side. Stained dagger now in the stranger's hand. It was a struggle to take everything in, to know what she felt, let alone how best to react. Did you see anyone leaving? No. Abruptly, she swung back to her. No, I didn't kill him. You know, why is it all the stupid people pick up the knife? Why? You don't pick up the knife. Just leave the knife where it is. Don't pick it up. Come, we must go in and tell them. She blinked but didn't move. Did Ruskin have a wife, do you know? No, no wife. If anything, she paled even more. He prayed she wouldn't soon, at least not before he got her inside. Appearing at his godmother's surrey via the terrace doors with the lady senseless in his arm would create a stir even more intense than murder. She started shaking as they went up the steps, but she clung to her composure with a grim determination. He was experienced enough to admire. The terrace doors were ajar. They walked in the drawing room without drawing any particular attention. Finally, in good light, he looked down at her, studied her features. She was straight, finely chiseled nose, lips a trifle too wide, yet full, lush, and tempting. She was above average in height, her dark hair piled in high gleaming coils, exploring the delicate nape of her neck and the fine bones of her shoulders. Fortunately, she seemed in no danger of succumbing to vapor. Spying a chair along the wall, he guided her to it. I must speak with Lady Amory's butler. If you remain here, I'll send a footman with a glass of water. Alicia tilted her eyes to his face, his velvet black eyes to concern and focus. She sensed behind his expression, behind the mask-like chiseled, hotly angular planes. He was the most striking, attractive, masculine face she'd ever seen. He was the most startling, attractive man she'd ever met. Elegant, graceful, and strong. It was his strength she was aware of when he'd taken her in his arm and walked beside her. Senses had drunk him in. If you would, thank you for the more than the glass of water. He bowed, then turned and headed across the room, suppressing an inner wench, not just reluctance, but real resistance to leaving her. Tony found a footman and dispatched him to retrieve her. Then, ignoring the many who tried to catch up with him, he found Clusters, the Amory's butler, and pulled him into the library to explain the situation and give him orders. He'd been visiting Amory House since he was 6 months old. The staff knew him well. They acted on his orders, summoning his lordship from the card room and her ladyship from the drawing room, and sent a footman for the watch. He wasn't entirely surprised by the ensuing circus. His godmother was French, after all, and in this instance she was ably supported by the watch captain, a superior sort who saw difficulties where none existed. Having taken the man's measure with one glance, Tony admitted mentioning the lady's presence. There was, in his view, no reason to expose her to further and unnecessary trauma, given the dead man's size and the way she'd held the dagger. It was difficult, if not impossible, to convincingly cast her as the killer. The man he'd seen leaving the grounds via the garden gate was much more likely to have done the deed. Besides, he didn't know the lady's name. You didn't get her name? You really need to go back and get her name. Can you go back and get her name? His mind remained full of the lady, his conscious of a certain disappointment. He hadn't expected her gratitude, yet he wouldn't have minded a chance to look into those green eyes again, to have them focus on him when they weren't shaded in shock, to look and see if she had felt that stirring, the quickening in the bulb, the flicker of heat. In the distance, a bell toward the hour. Drawing in another breath, he went down the steps and headed home. She wasn't in the chair when he got back. Oh. Uh, it was therefore rude shock to shaken awake by his father's valet, who had inherited along with the title, and informed him there was a gentleman downstairs wishfully of speaking with him, even though it was only 9 o'clock. When asked to state his business, the gentleman replied that his name was Dalziel, and their master would surely see him. Accepting that no one in his right mind would claim to be Dalziel if they weren't, so that's his boss, or his former boss. He has to get up out of bed, even though he's had a late night, and go down and talk to the guy before 9 a.m. And you know, in the ton, anything before noon is unacceptable. Even it was just past 9, entering the library where Hungerford, his butler, had left Dalziel to kick his heels. The first thing he became aware of was the aroma of fresh coffee. Hungerford had served Dalziel a cup. Nodding to Dalziel, elegantly disposed in an armchair, he went straight to the bell pull and tugged, then turned and propping an arm on the mantelpiece faced Dalziel, who set down his cup and was waiting. I apologize for the early hour, but I understand from Whitley that you discovered a body last night. Tony looked in Dalziel's dark brown eyes, half hidden by half lids, and wondered if such occurrences ever slipped past his attention. I did, pure chance. What's your Whitley's interest? Lord Whitley was Dalziel's opposite number in the Home Office. Tony had been one, possibly the only member of Dalziel's group ever to have liaised with agents run by Whitley. Their mutual targets had been a spy network operating out of London, attempting to undermine Wellington's campaigns. The victim, William Ruskin, was a senior administrative clerk in the Customs and Revenue Office, Dalziel said. I came to inquire, was there any story I should know? A senior administrative clerk in the Customs and Revenue Office, often calling the stiletto an assassin's blade. Tony was no longer sure. He'd refocused on Dalziel's face, and I don't believe so. He knew that Dalziel would have noted his hesitation. Equally, he knew that his erstwhile commander would accept his assessment. Dalziel did with an inclination of his head. He rose. If there's any change in the situation, let me know. With a polite nod, he headed for the door. Tony saw him into the hall and handed him into the care of the footman, retreating to the library. He wondered as often as he had just who Dalziel really was. Well, it's going to take a few books. It's probably going to take 6 or 7 books for you to figure out who it is. He's certainly of aristocracy, with his finely hued Norman features, pale skin, and sable hair. Yet Tony had checked enough to know that Dalziel wasn't his last name. Dalziel was slightly shorter and leaner than men he commanded, all ex-guardsmen, yet he projected an aura of lethal purpose. In a room larger than men, would instantly mark him as most dangerous. The one man a wise man would never take his eye from. The door to the street shut. A second later, Hungerford appeared with a bear tray, a steaming cup of coffee. Tony took it with a grateful murmur. All like excellent buffers, Hungerford seemed to know what he was required without having to be told. Shall I ask cook to send up your breakfast, my lord? Yes, I'll be going out shortly. Hungerford asked no more, but silently left him. Tony savored the coffee, along with the premonition of Dalziel's appearance, and his few words had sent tingling along his nerve. He was too wise to ignore or dismiss the warning, yet in this case it wasn't personally involved. But she might be. He needed to find the lady. Does he find the lady? Does he work with her to solve the mystery of who killed that guy? And Ruskin. And do they fall in love? And how do the rest of the Bastion Club feel? And somewhere along the line, someone knows who Dalziel is, one of the wives, well. But so we did The Lady Chosen last week. This week we did A Gentleman's Honor. Next week we'll do A Lady of His Own. And A Fine Passion after that. And To Distraction. And Beyond Seduction. And The Edge of Desire. And Mastered by the Love, Dalziel's book, the last book. So if you could please hit the like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And have a good night, day, morning, whatever you're having. Have a good one.